Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Kumusta naman po tayo? Good afternoon. All right, it's been a fun time. I've been catching up sa mga modules natin since the start of this training. And I believe na marami na tayong natututunan. And I hope that I will be able to give you a lot of tips aside from just information sa ating module for this afternoon, which is all about assessment in flexible learning mode. So I will just share my screen. Okay. Good afternoon. Ang dami natin. All right. So I think we are almost halfway through our training for gearing up for the next normal, training of teachers on flexible learning. And I hope that it's been a really productive time. Huwag kayong mag-alala. We have an assignment for this module, but I'm sure that you will be able to do it. So just to introduce myself, I am Assistant Professor Marie Angelique Crisanto. I will be your resource person for Module 5, Assessment in Flexible Learning Mode. I am an Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Information and Communication Studies. I've been teaching since 2016, and I am also the program chair in the Diploma in Computer Science. At UPOU, I teach from the undergraduate courses, from the diploma courses, and our master's courses. So, iba't ibang estudyante at iba't ibang background. So I hope that I will be able to impart some of this knowledge to you and the knowledge that I have received from my colleagues at UPOU as well. So let's have a short review. In the previous modules, we have gone over the overview of flexible learning. So this was discussed by our Chancellor, Melinda Bandalaria. We have also talked about the backward design process at the course level, care of Assistant Professor Marshall. And we have also discussed module writing and the course materials development by Dr. Serrano. And I think Tuesday, Chancellor Bandalaria came back to talk about developing the teacher training curriculum. For these past modules, nabanggit every now and then ang assessment. And I know a lot of us have questions concerning it. How do we do it well in the online or flexible setup? And that is what I hope to be able to share this afternoon. So just to give you an overview of what we will be discussing, first we will go over the what's and whys. What is assessment and why do we assess? And then we will go over the different forms and types of assessment, including authentic assessment. And we will talk about how do we facilitate assessment in flexible learning and in the different modes of instructional delivery. And of course, we'll talk about the features and concerns in online assessment. So before that, mag-icebreaker muna tayo konti. We will have a short survey. If you can click, hindi pala natin pwede i-click yung link. But if you can type the link, https://rebrand.ly/survey time, or you can scan the QR code there. we have a short survey at yung question of the day natin ay ito. What are your favorite or usual assessment activities? Ano ba yung mga binibigay natin na assignments sa students natin? Nagbibigay ba tayo ng mga quiz, exams? Alin yung favorite niya dito? So I'll give you a bit of time to do it. And as we go along, well, you can share what you did face to face. You can also share what you have been doing if you've been doing the online setup na. Yun. So what are your usual or favorite? Okay, so I believe na we already have some answers. I'll give you more time. Syempre, as we go along with this afternoon session, malalaman naman natin that there's no wrong types of assessment, but we will see which are the more fitting ones for our setup ngayon, our setup sa new normal and our setup when we move towards flexible learning. Okay, so I think we can go over some of the results right now. Wow, maraming sagot. Right. Okay, so gumagalaw-galaw pala siya habang nadadagdagan ang ano. Okay. All right, nice answers. Ayan, i-move natin ng konti. Essay, quiz, parang yung quiz yung pinakamalaki. Exam, performance test, problem solving, case analysis, discussion forum. Madami, no? Yes, you can also type it there in the comments box. Project-based, return demonstration. Wow. Reflection. Great answers. Makikita natin that many of us use the same assessment. And as we can see, ang daming nakasulat dito, no? Recitation, and marami pang nadadagdag. So we can see that a lot of us use different styles of assessment to see if our students are learning or not. Okay, thank you for that. You may continue to answer and we can still go over this later. So yun, thank you very much for sharing your answers for our question of the day. So yun. Okay, so I guess it's time to get started on the whats and whys of assessment. We'll go over the different assessment types that you have shared and you are continuing to share. But first, let's go back to the basics. So before we can decide on how we will choose to carry out assessment as we adapt our courses to the flexible mode of learning, let us go to the foundations and look through the definition of assessment. And let's also revisit the purpose of assessment so we can clearly decide what assessment methods we are to use for our future courses. So here are a few definitions. So this definition is from Teaching and Learning at a Distance. Assessment is the process of measuring, documenting, and interpreting behaviors that demonstrate learning. Now, I know a lot of us may have gone through this before, but it's nice to go back and see kung ano ba talaga ang assessment. Ayon naman sa the glossary of education reform, it refers to the wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. I've underlined a few things that have stood out to me on this review on assessment. So, una, it's a process, it's ongoing, it demonstrates learning, it shows if our students are learning or not. It's a wide variety, gaya ng nakita natin sa ating word cloud kanina. There are so many different methods that we can use. But no matter what we choose, this is to evaluate and measure and document if our students are ready, if they are learning, if they get skills, and if we actually meet their educational needs. A few more definitions by the language assessment principles and classroom practices. It is an ongoing educational practice that encompasses a wide range of methodological techniques. So again, it's ongoing and it uses a wide range of techniques. And from IT learning and development's online learning tutorials at the Penn State University, it is the process of documenting knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs, usually in measurable terms. And the goal is to make improvements as opposed to simply being judged. So we do not simply judge if our assessment means that we have a good student or a not so good student, but the measurable terms allow us to make improvements in the learning of the students. So if we try to summarize and synthesize these 4 definitions from the Victoria State Department as cited in Bonito in 2018, we can also just simply say that assessment is the ongoing process of gathering, analyzing, and reflecting on evidence to make informed and consistent judgments to improve future student learning. Going back, the what is this? Ito yung what. It's an ongoing process of gathering, analyzing, and reflecting on evidence. So we do it throughout the whole learning process, throughout the whole teaching process. We analyze and we reflect on these evidences. And why do we do it? This is to make informed and consistent judgments to improve the future student learning. This is the very purpose why we do assessment, not just so that the students have something to do or that we have a basis for the grades, but it is so that we can really just make sure that our students continuously improve. Okay. So the first part was very quick. Pahaba ng pahaba po ang ating mga sections. Let's go to the forms of assessment. Now that we have clarified the what's and why's of assessment, let us discuss the forms and types of assessment. You may already be familiar with some of these, and it would truly help to be refreshed as you start to think about the assessment that would be the best fit for your courses in the flexible mode of learning. Okay, so we have more participants coming in, and I hope that we'll be able to catch up. But let's go to the first types. So we have the formative versus summative assessment. So formative assessment, we use tools that identify misconceptions, struggles, and learning gaps along the way. And we assess how to close those gaps. So we can include the students assessing themselves, their peers, or even the instructor through writing, quizzes, conversation, and more. So this is by the Purvey Center for Teaching and Learning, Yale University. Versus summative assessment that sum up what a learner has achieved at the end of a period of time relative to the learning aims and the relevant national standards. This is by the National Foundation for Educational Research in England and Wales. So we are going over formative and summative assessment because we have to remember that we have to have both of them when we deliver our courses. We cannot have formative assessment alone, nor can we just rely on using summative ones. So let's go back to formative. Sa formative, makikita natin if along the way they are actually picking something out from what we have delivered in our course packs. And summative assessment, it's usually at the very end, but let's say we have midterm exams or at certain points we have a summative assessment to get a numerical grade for or a numerical standing for their learning. So this is so that they can level up, maybe level up to the next phase in the course or the next phase in their curriculum, or when they graduate. Kailangan natin ng mga basis for the grades when students graduate. That is why both of these, formative and summative, are very important. So we also have the types of assessment na assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning. Makikita natin na yung assessment for learning is actually the formative type of assessment, and it is using assessment so as an investigative tool to find out what the students know and what they can do, what confusions, preconceptions, or gaps that they may have. So we can use so many tools. We can use a wide variety of tools to get a wide variety of information, which will be the basis for determining what the students need to do next, or what we need to do next to move the students' learning forward, and the basis for descriptive feedback for students on deciding on groupings, instructional strategies, and learning. So our role as teachers here is to provide the feedback to students about their learning and how to improve. And the strategies for assessment for learning are sharing the learning expectations, eliciting evidence, feedback, self-assessment, peer assessment, to name a few. So that's assessment for learning. Yung assessment as learning naman, which we also know as metacognition. In this type of assessment, learning, we recognize that learning is not just a matter of transferring ideas from someone who is knowledgeable to someone who is not. So we therefore design assessment tools which allow students to make sense of the information and relate it to prior knowledge and use it for new learning. In metacognition, we help students to take more responsibility for their own learning and monitoring future directions. So this is especially crucial in helping students become lifelong learners. Our teachers' roles here in assessment as learning is to design our instruction and assessment that allows the student to think about and monitor their own learning. So we give them guided instruction on how they can discover how they learn. And we use reflective questions or logs for the students to report the strategies which they use to support or challenge their learning and the mechanisms they use to adjust and advance learning. Okay, so eto, makikita natin later on that we have a type of assessment na yung journaling. So you can see how the students are learning along the way. So we go to assessment of learning, which is the summative learning. And we are adopting assessment strategies designed to confirm what the students know, to demonstrate whether or not they have met curriculum outcomes or the goals of their individualized programs, or to certify proficiency. So this is usually conducted again at the end of the student learning or at certain points in the semester or in the term or trimester, whatever we are using in our institutions, and it summarizes the students' learning. So we again employ the assessment for learning, assessment as learning, and assessment of learning all throughout the delivery of our course. And parang ang hirap, no? Ang dami nating assessment. Hindi ba pwedeng summative na lang? Pero yung for learning and as learning, it doesn't have to be graded. The summative learning is the one that requires grade. But when we talk about formative and metacognition, we don't have to give it a numerical grade, but we employ it so that we can see if there are gaps and we can see if the students are picking up something from our lessons along the way. And it's especially more difficult when we are in a flexible setup, when we don't see our students all the time, when we can check up on our students all the time to see if they are coping well. But we do this so that we know that the students will not be lost. So with that, let's move on to some assessment approaches. What I will be talking about in this portion are the alternative methods which are aligned with authentic performance-based and constructivist approaches. So when we say authentic, it means they are meaningful and it can relate well with real life experiences of the learners. And it requires higher order thinking skills like judgment and innovation. So I know that a lot of us have shared what we have been using and what we plan to use in our classes in the flexible learning mode. But the ones that I will share are some suggestions that you may try to explore. We have actually published this in a book, Assessment Praxis in Open and Distance E-Learning. So if you are interested in these approaches, this can be found in our network site and you can read more about it. But I will be discussing about this in a while. So for the questions, I'm sorry because I can't really see them as I present here on screen, but we'll go back to them when we have the question and answer portion later. So do hold on to those questions. But if there are some who could also answer in the chat box, then feel free to do so. So just a few assessment approaches that we can try in the flexible learning are the portfolio system, blog or weblog, peer assessment, e-journal writing, oral authentic assessment, network analysis, and of course, we still use rubrics. So for the ePortfolio system, it is a repository platform of learning that showcases students' deeper perspective and self-reflections, whether it is an effective wherein it is also an effective venue for learning by doing. It aims to showcase academic achievements, real work, research progress, and so on. So if we are handling subjects or courses that allow students to produce creative output, say we have photography classes, writing classes, art classes, what we used to do is that we let them submit their output. If what we are doing right now is simply letting them email it to you or uploading it into the learning management system, what we can actually do is we can ask them to group it all together into a portfolio online so that we, as well as they, can see how they have been progressing throughout the course. And if there are other courses that are interconnected with that one, then they can also see how they have been improving throughout the different courses. So that's the ePortfolio system. And of course, if they have this compilation of their best work, well, when the students apply for a job later on, they don't have to struggle trying to consolidate their output, but they have something that is already ready to share to their prospective employer. So that's the ePortfolio system. Now, we also have the blog or web blog. It is an alternative tool for formative assessment and reflective learning. So the advantages, of course, our students could always be online and dialed in, so we can access this anytime we want. It's ideal for interactive learning by commenting on the blog, and it enhances reflection. So I have seen that many have put in reflection papers sa ating assessment methods. This can also be how we can translate the reflection papers online. We also have peer assessment. So in peer assessment, it is giving informed feedback to one another on an assignment. It normally happens during the learning process, and it is also applied in works in progress. This method provides opportunities for students to use the feedback they receive to revise their work. I received questions before about peer assessment na paano gagawin fair ang peer assessment, kasi baka naman may nag-assess ng peers nila tapos may galit sila kaya sinisiraan nila yung peers. So again, it would be good if hindi siya graded. So but we encourage them enough to give constructive feedback on the assignments of the work of their classmates so that it can be improved. We used to do this in our thesis proposals. So if the students have a topic in mind, their peers can give feedback, and they can share what other things they can try to study on, and so on. So we can see how this can be implemented in our courses as well. So we also have the e-journal writing, okay, and different from the blog, this is an approach that uses the journal method where students keep their notes and execute their activity sheets. So the notes about the assignments, posts, and dates of posting should be written on this journal. So again, we might confuse this with a blog, but this is more detailed, and maybe more technical in a way that the student will show what is what they have been doing, when they have been doing it, and perhaps what they have been learning in the process. So, ayan, medyo umuulan na po dito. Maulan po ba dyan sa inyo? I hope that it won't interfere too much with the audio. But let's go on to another assessment approach, which is the oral authentic assessment. This would work best, I believe, if we have a smaller number of students, because instead of taking a written exam, we will give one via teleconferencing or other platforms where we allow the student to sit for this oral exam based on a specific schedule. And the questions are formulated based on the objectives of the course, but mostly applied and, of course, are theoretically sound. I know some colleagues who do this, that they really have a one-on-one session with the students online and quiz them about what they have learned. So if we are concerned about cheating in summative assessment, in oral exams, we can see them eye to eye and see if they are doing any sort of monkey business. So if you have smaller number of students, this is a good thing to try. And of course, when we do thesis proposals or defenses, we of course use this as well. So we can also use network analysis, which can be used to assess interactions among class participants using a couple of statistical tools. And we maximize the interaction among learners in an online learning community, wherein it can positively contribute to knowledge construction. So for example, if we have an online colloquium course, and we have a learning management system, we can use the data from the learning management system to analyze if the participants or if our students are interacting well with each other. So of course, hindi na naman mawawala ang ating rubrics. So to guide the student activity and to provide basis for grading for instructor. And I think for online and flexible learning, we have to be clearer in giving out the rubrics. So for online discussions, for example, we need to specify the number, frequency, and manner of relating posts that the student is expected to make. So the ones that I have discussed are alternative approaches, of course, but what about the traditional approaches like quizzes and exams? So of course, let's go ahead and use quizzes, for example, for formative assessment and exams for summative assessment. But I know that we are also aware of the dark side of online learning. So we can consider using proctoring systems together with other techniques to ensure integrity of these assessment tools. So we'll discuss these further later as we move on to the next section, the next few sections. But going back to the types of assessment and the alternative approaches that we can use, what is important is that we use a variety of methods, including evidence-based assessment. So we use the different assessment methods and activities to measure different processes and outcomes. So the keywords are variety, different, and different processes and outcomes. I have highlighted those because the key to quality assessment is to ensure that the right types of samples of a learner's work are gathered in order to accurately make inferences about the extent of learning or achievement. So I guess the question on most of our minds is how do we ensure that it is the right type, and how do we then deliver the right type? We have heard about the different types of assessment. We have heard about the alternatives we can use. But what is the right type for my course? What is the right type for my specific subject? And how do I do it? We will go to that in a bit. But first, we will take a break. So let's have a 3-minute break to do some stretching, to get a glass of water or go to the toilet. And as we go to our break, then we have another survey here. So rebrand.ly/break thoughts. We also have the QR code for that. And you may answer the survey, which is really just asking, what have you been learning so far in the first half of this talk? You may also type it in the comments bar. And yeah, some have shared in the chat box. So let's come back after 3 minutes. Okay, so I will start the timer and I'll see you after. All right, we have a couple more seconds, around 30 more seconds before the break ends. So I will just go over to to the results of our Mentimeter. Oops. All right, So what are you discovering so far about assessment in flexible learning? Creativity, variety, versatility, become passionate. There are so many types, yes, reliability, dark side, applicable and more interesting. Yes, teachers have different perspectives, the different good assessment to implement. Assessment in flexible learning is varied. Yes, we should choose the ones that fit our learners, students' understanding, different types of assessment. The right type of assessment is crucial to counterattack the dark side. That is true. It helps. There are various alternative forms. Okay. There are alternative assessments appropriate for digital era as compared to the conventional ways. Okay, good thoughts so far. Yes, I'm glad that we have discovered a lot of things throughout the first part of the talk. Now you can always go back to this Mentimeter to see the thoughts and the learnings of your fellow learners. So I will just close this now and go back to our main talk. Okay, so let us go back. So let's now move to the hows. So kanina we talked about the whats and the whys and the different forms and types. Now we will go on to the how. How do we facilitate assessment in flexible learning and different modes of instructional delivery? So this is where we left off. We left off with this statement that the right types of samples of a learner's work must be gathered accurately to make inferences about the extent of learning or achievement. So what makes a sample the right type? And how do we facilitate in getting the right type of samples? So here are a few steps that we can follow. So these are not set in stone, but these are actually some suggestions on what we can do when we give out assignments or when we have our different types of learning. So this one will focus more on the summative assessment because this is the ones that would require grades. Kaya kailangan mas planchado ang ating pag-facilitate ng assessment na ito. So first, we select the summative assessment method to use. We have discussed a variety of these already, and we will discuss a few more. We design the assessment, we organize the assessment. We, of course, let the students do the assessment. We mark the assessment and give feedback, and we evaluate or reevaluate the assessment. So when selecting the assessment method, we have this triangle. So from the Memorial University Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, the course alignment means that the learning outcomes, here, I can show you, yes. The learning outcomes or the objectives must match the activities that we do in our online classes. And these, of course, match the assessment as well. So these three are not independent from one another, but they have to support one another. So they further explain that the verb in the learning objectives can guide the selection or the development of assessment that can measure how well students achieve the outcome. Therefore, your learning objectives dictate your assessment that you will use in your course. So in Module 2, we have discussed about the backward approach, and I believe that you have highlighted the learning outcomes there. In your assignment, in the learning activity, you were also asked to plot the learning objectives, activities, and the assessment there. So that is why we are doing this, because they are connected with each other. And we give assessment not just because gusto natin pahirapan yung mga students, but because this should match with the learning outcomes for the course. So when we, for example, have a learning outcome that says to analyze the blah, 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 the assessment would have to have analysis, of course, in its design. And for example, I teach programming. So my learning outcome would be to be able to program a simple mathematical tool. Then I would have to have an assessment that enables the students to program. So these are all connected with one another: the learning outcome, the activity, and the assessment. So always go back to our learning outcomes. Ngayon, hindi naman dahil they are aligned with each other, the learning outcome, the activity, and assessment, hindi naman ibig sabihin per learning outcome, dapat may tig-isang assessment yon. What if you only have 2 learning outcomes? Ibig sabihin ba dalawa lang yung learning assessment? Or what if you have 10 learning outcomes? 10 din ba yung assessment? We will find out later when we organize and plan the assessment that it is not necessarily so, but we can actually lump the several similar learning outcomes together, or maybe even split one big learning outcome to several assessment activities. So in selecting what assessment method to use, always go back to the learning outcome. So once you have selected your assessment, you can start designing the assessment already. So here are some general principles that you can consider in designing the summative assessment in your courses. So the principles of clarity, accuracy, relevance, and transferability, reliability, validity, and transparency. So when we say clarity, our assessment should have a clear purpose. What is the purpose? It's to demonstrate the learning objectives, and and it should be able to demonstrate their learning as well. Accuracy. It should measure performance against a set of criteria or standards. So we usually have rubrics, and we usually show the grading scheme to the students. Relevance and transferability. It should address the skills that will be applied in real life contexts. So the assignments that we give should be authentic, and it can be applied, of course. Reliability, it should yield uniform results when repeated by students or marked by multiple individuals. So for example, if you have a large class and you have tutors or different people who are marking them, then the assessment that you give should have uniform results, meaning it should yield uniform results. So validity, it should measure what they intend to measure. And transparency, we should give clear, accurate, and consistent information on the assessment tasks for the students. So when we give a grade to the student, they should know why they got a 90, for example, or why they got a 70. So we should be transparent to them about that as well. So given these principles, let us look at a few more. So this time, this is by the University of South Australia. In addition to the one given by the University of South Australia, this is by Graham and his colleagues. So these are 7 principles of effective teaching, a practical lens for evaluating online courses. So we can apply this in our assessment design as well. So in principle number 1, it says the good practice encourages learner-faculty contact. So with this, we as instructors should provide clear guidelines for interaction with our learners. And so, for example, how, if they have clarifications about the subject, how will they reach out to us? Can they reach out to us, or are they not allowed to clarify further? So that's principle number 1. Principle number 2, good practice encourages cooperation among learners. So well-designed discussions or collaborative assignments must be part to facilitate meaningful cooperation among learners. I do this a lot in my course because my students have different backgrounds. So I believe that the learning that they can pick up from one another is even greater than the learning that they will pick up from me. And I believe that this is so even with the discussion forums in this training, because as you interact with fellow educators, you can see what practices they are doing and what have they learned as they employ those practices as well. So this is a good form of assessment as learning as well. So for principle 3, good practice encourages active learning. So the learners can present the course projects, and they are, of course, active roles. As we move on to the flexible mode of learning, as we do this, we know that the learners are, it's really learner-centered. It's learner-centered when we have our course, when we facilitate our course assessments. Okay, so principle 4, this is a struggle, especially if we have lots of students, but if we can do it, then it is a very good practice. Good practice gives prompt feedback. So we as instructors need to provide 2 types of feedback: information feedback and acknowledgement feedback. So acknowledgement feedback is, of course, this is received, great job. Information feedback, mali itong part na to, this is the correct solution, try this one. So I think we had it easier during face-to-face because you can either mark it on the spot while the students are doing the activity in the classroom, and you can go around and give feedback there. But if a lot of you have already been doing this the past year, you can feel na minsan natatambakan din tayo ng mga kailangan gradean at nahihirapan tayo magbigay ng feedback. But if we, as we reevaluate our assessment, we can see how we can actually improve in terms of giving feedback. So principle number 5, good practice emphasizes time on task. Online courses need deadlines. Mahirap na open time. So kaya din tayo natatambakan ng mga checkan kapag open time. So if we can give deadlines, then it is a good practice to do so. Good practice communicates high expectations. So we need to still give challenging tasks or sample cases and praise for quality work to communicate high expectations. I know that we are in the middle of a pandemic and we have been extending compassion as much as we can. But of course, we can, there are instances that we have to still value excellence and see to it that the assessment that we are giving are challenging enough and not so easy na wala na palang hindi natin nakikita kung may natututunan ba yung students natin. So that's a challenge. So for Principle 7, good practice respects diverse talents and ways of learning. So we can allow learners to choose project topics that incorporates diverse views into online courses. So they don't have to do the exact same assessment, but most of the time it's their process of doing the assessment, for example, is what's more important than the final output. So maybe as an example that I can give for principle number 7, I teach a class on creating websites, but my students have varying degrees of programming expertise. Some of them are actually working as web developers, and some of them don't have any programming background. So does this automatically mean that the ones with no background get a failing grade or the lowest grade? It does not necessarily mean so, because if they can choose what project they can do, then if I see that they have given a lot of effort, then in my rubrics, it should also reflect that they can get a high grade. So with these different principles, the 7 here and then the ones discussed here, we can have these guidelines that we can follow in designing the assessment. So number 1, of course, is to consider your learning objectives and ensure that the assignments are aligned. Number 2, design assessment that are interesting and challenging. And number 3, name assignments accurately. So this comes with clarity. And of course, in flexible learning, we have our course pack, for example. So when they see the course pack, they already have an expectation or an overview of what they are going to be doing for the course in terms of assignments when they see the assignments named accurately. Number 4, sequence assignments that they build skills in a logical manner. So wag nating bibiglain ang ating mga students at bigyan natin ng mahirap na assignment kaagad at pagkatapos nun mag-give up na sila. But we sequence it so that the level of difficulty builds up and the level of skills also build up. Consider how much time each assignment will require and the spacing of assignments throughout the term. If we have already given these assignments before, let's say in the previous year when we have done online learning, pag nakita natin na nahirapan ng mga estudyante sa dami ng assignments, maybe we can consider grouping similar assignments together and reducing the number. What I can say about this is that the number of assignments in face-to-face setup really does not translate or equate to the online setup. For example, before teaching in UPOU, I taught face-to-face computer science classes. So every week, we would have a laboratory class where the students would do programming assignments. So if that's every week, they actually have 12 exercises. So for those 12 exercises, they have 3 hours to do it. And I can go around and then I can check, and then they're done for the week. But for if I would expect an online class for them to upload and defend their programming assignment every week, it is not a it's not I wouldn't think it would be reasonable for the students, and I wouldn't think it would be reasonable for myself. So we should consider how much time each assignment will require. And number 6, of course, is to check the feasibility of each assignment. We have been adjusting to the new normal, and we know that there are some assignments that cannot be done online. So if they cannot be done online, then we must find alternatives on how else can we have the learning objective met, or see if there are other tools out there that we can use. So make sure that it is feasible. And number 7, articulate the task description clearly. Again, clarity is the key, because in face-to-face setup, we know that the students can clarify it quickly. When we give out the assignment, they have the questions about what they have to do if it's not clear. But if you give a course pack to a student and we don't have synchronous sessions like these to clarify, sometimes it's hard to do that back and forth. And for example, may isang estudyante na nagtanong kung ano yung task na ito, and then other students email you, and it's not productive for everyone. So it's better to just at the start make sure that the task description is clear enough to avoid that. And of course, we have to establish the clear performance criteria so that the students know how they will be graded, and specify the intended audience for the assignment output so that they know on the approach that they will take for that assignment. Specify the purpose of the assignment and specify the parameters for the assignment. So the parameters, of course, would be instructions like, will you upload a PDF? Will you upload a Word file? Will you also upload a video? What should you follow a file convention? How long should the video be? How long should the paper be? All those things, we must be able to specify it. So for the assignments, we have been using these in the face-to-face setup, and we can still use this in our online setup. So we can still continue to use reports, research papers, case studies, critical essays, proposals, multimedia projects, reflection papers, demonstrations, posters, and infographics, e-portfolios. So it's just translated online. We usually have it uploaded into our learning management systems and so on. All right. So with these assignments, the important thing to note is that it is aligned with our course objectives. And we will see that here as we organize and plan the assessment. We can actually use this table to see if we have enough assignments, and if our modules, if all our modules are covered and all the course objectives are covered, and if the due dates are feasible and reasonable for the students. So if you've been filling this out and parang kulang pa ang assignments kasi hindi naman covered lahat ng objectives, and you can add it and then change the due dates and so on. So we see that in flexible learning, even though it's online and flexible, the key truly is to plan things thoroughly at the start, but at the same time, still remain flexible. Kasi nga, flexible learning. So we do have due dates. I have experience setting my due dates in stone, but we know that a lot of things happen. Students will give excuses why they cannot fulfill the deadline. So it's up to you on how you will assess, if you will give minus points if late ba ang assignments, or if you will keep it open. So it's up to you as an instructor, and it's up to it's up to you. Okay, medyo mahaba po ang portion, mahaba-haba ang portion na to, but don't worry, we are almost there. So after organizing and planning the assessment, we go to the actual writing of the assignment guide. So for the assignment guide, it's very important that we have these out, because we have these together with our course pack as well, so that everything that the students need to know about your assignment and assessments, they are already there. So we have in our assignment guide the submission date, the task, the procedures or specific guidelines to be followed, and the evaluation criteria. So for our learning activity, okay, just to wake you up a bit, for our learning activity for this module, I will be asking you to create, to write an assignment guide for each of your groupings. So it would depend on what course or subject, but just one assignment guide. So the assignment guide is a document that gives students detailed guidance on what an assignment requires. It specifies the assignment number and title or name, and includes the following specifications. So the submission date, when is the assignment due, and this will truly help the student to manage their time when it comes to their other classwork or other non-class related work. So the task needs to be clear and concise, and it is a description of the learning task and the expected final output or product. The procedures or specific guidelines to be followed consists of the steps that they should follow in accomplishing the assignment, and the evaluation criteria, of course, indicates in the form of a scoring guide or rubric on how assignment submissions will be evaluated. The assignment guide can also specify the following. So you can also specify the percentage of the final grade the assignment will account for, a definition of terms used, especially in the task overview, and a list of tools and resources to be used in completing the assignment. Here is an example assessment guide. So for example, in this course on the foundations of distance education, so we have here the due date, the percent equivalent, the task, okay, it's clear, not more than 1,500 words. Definition of terms, okay, we have that there. The specific guidelines, okay. So, yan. You will be given formative feedback. So my guidelines then about that. And then the evaluation criteria. So is your account clear and concise, and so on, so that they will know how they will be evaluated. So again, for this module's learning activity, you will be asked to create an assignment guide based on the assessment that you have, or you will be writing down in your course packs. Okay, so let's move on in facilitating assessment in flexible mode. So of course, after designing everything, organizing everything, and writing things out in detail, we let the students do the assessment. So there are so many types of assessments we can give out. So I will focus on online examinations and some of the assessment tools that we can use in our learning management systems. So this is a question that we get a lot. How do you conduct online examinations? How can we ensure the integrity of these online examinations? Lalong-lalo na kung sa face-to-face ay nag-cheat ang students natin, how much more sa online exams. So we have a few recommendations. And of course, kapag gusto talaga ng estudyante na makahanap ng paraan, makakahanap talaga ng paraan. So we do not have a 100% cheat-proof system. And later on, we will also talk about some other assessment tools that we can use in our learning management systems. So for our online examination recommendations, we recommend that we really use and perhaps even invest in a platform to use for this. So we can have for our learning management system, should it be a customized Moodle, Canvas, Blackboard, etc., or should we have a customized or purchase application like the online examination system that we also use in our university. So we prepare our platform, and then of course we create our exam. We know that creating our exam right now is not as easy as typing it out and then printing it and then stapling it together. But for online exams, what we have to do, or what we can do, is we, if possible, we randomize questions when creating our exams and quizzes to minimize the possibility of sharing answers. And then we set up a time limit if possible. So when setting up a time limit, allow a 5-minute exception for all students to help ensure that those who wait until the last minute to submit their answers don't get kicked off the system. And then we only allow for one submission of a completed exam to nullify the ability of students to change answers once they have left the exam room. We create a password for the student that will be given to the students on exam day. So this helps ensure that only the students who come to the exam room can take the exam. Okay, so that's on how we create the exam. So pre-exam preparation, we prepare the students also. So we inform the students of the online exam in advance and ask them to be sure that their tablets or computers or other gadgets can connect to the internet and log into the chosen network and platform before coming to class on exam day. And then when we are now conducting the exam, we encourage the students to show up early and log into the chosen platform before the exam start time. We ask that the tablet, cell phone, PC screens be in a position to minimize the urge to look at someone else's answers, and do not allow other mobile devices in the exam room. If they will be using scratch paper, ask them to take a photo or show them to the video screen. So I've been mentioning videos here. So this would work if you have some sort of proctoring system, if you do this via Zoom, or if you invest in a proctoring software. So that's why there have been mentions of videos and photos here. And then don't allow late arrivals once the exam has started, if you choose to have a set time for your exam. And have students who leave before the exam time has expired check in with the instructor, so that the proper submission of the exam can be verified. So this ensures that no student can leave the room and log back into the exam to change answers. So this has been one of the, oops, sorry, it's gone. Ayan. Okay. So those are some tips, and I will be sharing a few more to ensure or to maintain academic integrity in your online exams. So as much as, if we do think we can try to do away with online exams, if your learning objectives would allow it, if our very concern is cheating, if we are allowed to, then it's okay. But if we cannot, if there is no possibility, and we still have to have online exams, then here are a few more tips for us from George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. So do not send out electronic files of the exam. Change your exams regularly. Do not post the answers to the exam until the deadline is over. Do not keep your exams available or open for extended periods of time, so that students don't have time to look up answers to questions before they take the exam. Another tip is to present exam questions one at a time, as opposed to having all questions posted. So this makes it more difficult to make a screenshot, and students will still be able to copy and paste each question into a Word doc, or screenshot every question individually. So if we do this, then if we can set a timer for each question and randomize each question, that would be better. And which brings us to the next point. Do not allow students that much time. The exam should be limited, and only allow enough time for students who knows the material to answer the questions without looking up answers online or in notes. They do not allow backtracking, so that students cannot quickly go through the exam and go back and start looking up the answers to all of the questions. Randomize the questions and answers. Have a pool of exam questions so that the students will not have the exact same exam. And stringent time limits, so that students don't have enough time to look up answers. We can see that creating an exam actually is as hard as for the students taking the exam. Mahirap din gumawa ng exam that will ensure that it maintains the academic integrity of the student. So make suggestions in the syllabus that the students should not use wireless internet connections to take their exams. Okay, I don't think this is applicable for us because we need Wi-Fi, but if your exam is a closed notes type of exam, then they should not open other browsers and so on. Suggest that if and when this is already possible, if our situations allow it, given the different different quarantine classifications, we can suggest that the students take the exam at a local or university library. So before the pandemic, we actually had this for students that they take a sit-down exam in the learning centers. Okay. So have a rule stated in the syllable that you will not reopen exams. There are cases that students will ask for a make-up exam because of excuses or situations that will probably warrant that makeup exam. So we should also have to have question banks so that it's not the exact same exam, but the question still it's still valid and reliable across all. Okay. All right, so a couple of people are sharing some tips in the chat box. So I hope that as I continue to discuss this, you are also reading the ones that our co-educators are sharing here. So yes, this is a healthy discussion, and I'm glad that you are also sharing what you have been doing so far. Okay. So as for the questions, we will head on to that when we go on to our question and answer portion, which will hopefully be in 10 minutes. So let's quickly just go over the example assessment tools in our learning management systems. Okay. So I know that we are using different kinds of assessment, different kinds of learning management systems. A lot of us could be using Google Classroom, but a few of these may not have so much more features. So as a disclaimer, hindi po ako representative ng Moodle, but I'm just sharing this because this is what we have been using. And if you are using Moodle, then you can also see that this is something that you can use, especially when it comes to making guides and rubrics and in the questions and question types. So as I've said, it's important to have rubrics. So how can we translate it online? So we can actually have marking guides in our LMS. So in Moodle, you can choose your assessment tool, create marking guides and rubrics. So it can be, it's a grading method. Choose simple direct grading if you don't have a rubric, but if you're going to make one, then choose marking guide and rubric. Okay, you can also actually have some blind marking in Moodle, which conceals the identity of the student from the marker to minimize bias. So in Moodle, a rubric is similar to the marking guide, but you can be more detailed about how to award points for a given criterion. So in this example, you can see how a rubric is constructed. You can specify the criteria here. And for each criteria, you can map the level at which the criteria was met to the number of points to be awarded. So this is helpful if you really want to be fair to your students and if you have other people marking it for you. So here is an example of a rubric created in Moodle. And you can see that there are different levels. And this reflects the relative importance that the instructor places on the criteria. Okay. And you can also reuse rubrics. So if another instructor has allowed it to be reusable, you can also use it to fit your needs. So for quizzes and question types, we have different types of questions aside from the usual identification or multiple choice. So you can actually see that there's true or false, matching, short answer, numerical essay calculated. You can explore more of those features in whatever LMS system that you choose to use. And okay, this is the usual one that we use. And we can see that although for online platforms, we feel that we are limited, but you can also see that there are features that we can maximize when we use online examination platforms. So we might not have a multiple choice like this if it's pen and paper, but while we can use the online one, then let's maximize the functionalities. So you can just explore. And I see that some people have also shared here that exam.net is a good platform for giving tests. So you can explore other platforms for this. Okay. Okay. All right, let's head on to those questions later. Again, it's a very tricky subject, maintaining academic integrity in online examinations. But before we go to that, in the steps in facilitating assessment, of course, we make sure that we mark the assessment and we give feedback. And then at the end, or maybe even in the middle of the semester, for example, you can evaluate and reevaluate the assessment. Nahihirapan ba ang mga student natin sa mga assignments? What are the reasons why they are having a difficult time? Is it because it's too much? Are we giving too little and they are just flying through the course? So we always need to have an evaluation stage. Okay, so let's go to the issues and concerns, which I know a lot of us are raising up here in the chat box. So, which is why the slides for these are only 2. So, of course, we are concerned with plagiarism and other violations of academic integrity. So not just in the online setup, but also in the face-to-face setup, we know that different modes of academic dishonesty is very rampant. And we must know how to protect the integrity of an online assessment. So yeah, somebody mentioned here, there's no such thing as a best platform. It's a matter of how you plan and facilitate your assessment. And I agree with that. And given how we plan and facilitate our assessment, we can also use additional tools. So we can use additional online proctoring tools for examinations, and for checking the integrity of papers, essays, and code, we can use software like Turnitin and Code Query. So we must also put our research skills to the test. to see how else we can make sure that the students are the ones who are doing their own work. So for me, for example, aside from counter checking the code, I also request students to do a 5-minute video of them explaining the code or and so on. So in a way, it's a form of formative assessment as well, the videos, but you can see their process through it. So it doesn't have to be a live video, but they can send one that they have already pre-recorded. And it's also a good tool that we can use to see if they were the ones who created their assignment. Okay. Okay, so here is something that to think about when we conduct our classes. How then can we also encourage our students to avoid academic dishonesty when it is very tempting and everyone else is doing it? This is a very hard question to think about. Something we need to think about when we were in the face-to-face setup and going on to the online platform as things get easier, as access becomes easier, then all the more we should be able to make our classes designed in such a way that we will, as much as possible, encourage integrity in our students. Okay, so we are at the end. So just to remind you of the learning activity per group, I will write the detailed assignment guide for this. So write an assignment guide for an assessment you have identified based on your course or subject's learning objectives. In our course site in Moodle, we will be uploading a study guide with the guide for the learning activity by tomorrow. Okay, so here are the references, and we now move on to the question and answers. I know you have a lot of questions. I will do my best to answer the questions as much as I can. Know that I'm also in the process of learning and going through the ropes, especially as things get even more challenging. So yes, I will stop sharing now, and to facilitate the question and answer, let me just take a drink of water first. Okay. So I'm not exactly sure how the question and answer goes. Shaira, can you help me out? So at the clarification on the learning activities, if it's all submitted in groups, it will depend on the module, but for my module, it will be submitted by group. Okay. So how do we do it? Do I call on people who are raising their hands? Okay, I think I should. Sir Ronald, go.
Yes. I have a question. I'm actually
Yes,
I am an advocate of ePortfolio, and a while ago you mentioned something about it. Can you share some probably useful websites where we can upload the works of our students? I mean, when you say ePortfolio, does it mean a Google Drive or a OneDrive, or do you have like a website, a free or an open access website where we can place the works of our students? Yun po ba yan?
Okay. Yes,
Thank you,
actually,
ma'am.
All right, sure, Sir Ronald. So the e-portfolio was actually used by our Bachelor of Arts in Multimedia Studies students. So since they are doing multimedia, they upload it in, what is this called? I'm not sure if the website is still working now, but some you can actually continue to use, let's say, the free account in WordPress or even Google Sites. So, for example, in WordPress, they allow you to upload photos and videos and written work. So that's one that you can use. Google Sites, it allows you to restrict who can access the page. So for example, if it won't be shown to the public, then you can give it to the ones that you will choose to give access to. There we can explore more, but if we're going to use Google Drive, well, the thing about it is, of course, it's private, but when we use content management systems like the ones that I have mentioned, it can be organized and presented in a more, let's say, beautiful and portfolio-like manner. So I hope that answered Sir Ronald's question. Okay, so yes, somebody, Mr. Paulo said, in the form of website, Wix, Weebly, and Google Sites are free, user-friendly, and easy to use. Okay, all right. So I guess I'll just start reading from the chat box as well. Question po, if you are to do away with giving online exams, what assessment approach will you adopt to determine the extent by which the students have achieved the learning outcomes of the course? Okay. So I actually have a class where I don't have online exams. It's a class on creating web information systems. So if, for example, the learning outcome in my class is that the students will be able to produce a web information system, it's more important to me that they produce that one rather than they be able to memorize or recite how the history of the internet, for example, or the different tools that they can use to create a website. So for example, for classes that are more practical and hands-on and production-based, then those are really the ones that I believe should not focus on having examinations, but focus on having the production part. Okay. Okay, so the examination may be taken in the school or in the library from Mr. Reynolds. Is in this time of pandemic, there are certain policies implemented by schools. What can you suggest for the university officials regarding these restrictions? So of course, we have to be updated with the restrictions given by the government and by our institutions themselves. So I know that in different parts of the Philippines, it's changing right now because there may be some who are slowly trying to have a bit of face-to-face, especially if there are some laboratory work involved. So it's ultimately up to the institution. But if we have found out that the students are able to access or they don't have problems with the internet connections, and they don't have problems with the cheating, then you can still carry on with having them take it in their homes. But if you do have problems with their academic integrity, then we have protocols naman, di ba, on how many are allowed in a particular room, how many percentage, and of course, the ventilation and all that. So if MGCQ naman kayo, and you can have that, like for a certain time, you can have 5 students with 1 proctor, then you can try to make arrangements. Yes, Pinoy ways, wala talaga makakatalo. Yes. From Mr. Paulo, how do you address misrepresentation, a form of cheating where a student pays for someone to write a paper on his behalf and pass it as his own? We do have experiences of this, and it's a very tricky thing to navigate. So this is where I believe, in my opinion, where oral defenses can help. So, for example, if you have an oral defense also for in that class where they write papers, then you can see if magkatugma ba yung sinasabi niya sa sinulat niya, and so on. So if, for example, they have their blogs or their e-journals and so on, you can see if the logs match and so on. Tama po ang sinabi ni Miss Aleli. Wala pong if we can find a way, we will always try to find a way. So yes, let's also try to find ways to encourage our students. I believe that one of the things talaga that we should do our best to do is encourage students to have that academic integrity. I think one way that we can also do is, for example, if they submit an assignment, there should be an honor code somewhere that I hereby declare that this submission is purely mine, and so on. So, kung makonsensya sila, edi nakonsensya sila. Sana makonsensya sila. Ang hirap, no? One of my colleagues has a quote in all his exams na rather succeed by, I don't know. The paraphrase is, mas okay na mag-fail ka na alam mo ginawa mo yung best mo, rather than mag-succeed ka na alam mo na mali yung ginawa mo. Okay, sorry. I spent too much time on that. So Miss Marisa said, can we include pre and post assessment in our module? Yes. By all means, go ahead. So pre-assessment is a form of formative learning for us to see where our students are, and post-assessment to also see how we can improve. Okay, let's see. What exam platform do you have time limit? One, is it open? You used it when I was your student. Hi, hello. Okay. And you use one type of platform that does that, but I did not know what platform that was. So the platform that we use in the diploma in computer science for giving exams with time limits is Moodle. And there, okay. Okay. Magandang quote kapag exam, be honest even if others are not. Okay, so let me read this one for okay, mahirap pala ito. Nagsuscroll siya mag-isa. From Mr. Ernesto. Good afternoon. Considering that there are many restrictions in doing online assessment, example, non-reopening of assessment and evaluation part of an LMS modules, not requiring students to open camera during evaluation, allowing browsing to other platforms, chatting while evaluation and assessment is ongoing, etc. How can we maintain the validity and reliability of online assessment? So I believe that the tips that I gave in my slides, which will be available in our model site, this will have some sort of it won't be foolproof, but it will somehow minimize it. If we do have the ability to have proctoring systems, then it would be best to go for it. And Sir Primo said that's why outcomes must have much weight and exams have least for them. So not be forced to cheat. Rather, it is a mere determination of what they have learned and a preparation on how they will answer board exams, but not the reason to fail. That's true. I agree with that. Okay. Okay, so Manny of SLSU Lukban Quezon says, Ma'am, I use Google Class in giving quizzes. We usually indicate time for submission, so there is a time allotment for each quiz. However, my student usually submit their quiz late. It means beyond the time allotment for the reason that they have a problem in internet connectivity. As an expert in computer science, okay, do you have any tips on how to control it and avoid late submission? If we can explore other platforms, I encourage you to do so. If you don't have access to let's say Moodle or Canva, but you can try, someone has posted about exam.net. I have not explored it yet, but if you can also explore the other ones that are available, then do so. So if your students submit their quiz late, how late is late? Maybe if it's just 5 minutes late, what would the 5 minutes mean? Are we concerned maybe they did some monkey work, or are we concerned that they took extra time? So if those are the concerns, then yes, I think it should be good to look at other learning management. Okay, more than 30 minutes, less than an hour. Okay, that's too much time. So find other plugins that have timer as well, and yun, okay. Some teachers administer the quiz as a group. Would this not affect the actual determination of one's potentials or capabilities? How do you mean as a group? So group silang sasagot ng ano? Well, I think if there are some assessment that they can do as a group, it's fine. But there should also be assessment that they should do individually. Okay. So what do you think is a difference between major exam and summative test? I just came across on one of the assessment requirements. So I think a major exam does count it as a summative test. Um, so although I have mentioned that it's usually at the end, but you can have it at certain points after one unit or a few units or so to have a summative grade or summative assessment of that part. Okay. All right. So somebody has replied to the question on submitting late. Give incentives to those who can submit early and consequences to those who submit late. That's true. So even if it's not an exam, if it's another form of assignment, some students also submit a few days late. And I tell them for every late day, you will have a deduction. Okay. Okay, so Mr. Alvin said that's why giving assessment during this pandemic is indeed critical on our part. We need to evaluate not only our students, but ourselves as well. That's true. We should familiarize ourselves with the personalities of our students so that we will be able to determine what type of assessment to use and tailor it to them. I agree, and it's really an ongoing learning process for all of us. That's why I'm glad that you are all here at this training, because I know that this is a step for you to learn to learn more, especially in terms of facilitating these types of assessment and so on in this new mode of delivery. Okay. May mga ano na dito, may mga Miss Universe na questions na. What is your take about giving a pass or fail as a final grade in this time of pandemic? So I think I will pass over that question. But I think because many institutions, if it were a perfect world and everybody would accept if a student is just passing or failing, it would be fine. But the world that we live in requires numbers at this point. So that's one reality that we have to face. Okay. So I think in giving assessment, we always also balance compassion, excellence, academic integrity. There are so many things to balance, right? And it's a tricky part, but we do the best that we can do. So I'm trying to scroll over to some more questions that I may have missed, especially the ones who have asked during the talk. Okay. So we have only a few minutes left, around 7 minutes left, but we can continue this discussion in the discussion forums in our course site. So a lot of the questions are really about cheating in exams. It's really a difficult thing to navigate through, which is, again, if we can have other modes of assessment, then we focus on those other modes. Okay, so somebody also asked about if it is improper or unhuman if you ask the student to be on camera during the online examination. This is a big thing, especially with data privacy issues. But if if we also give them face-to-face exams, they are right there in front of us. So if they can be in a place where no other people's privacy is being compromised, then I don't see the problem of monitoring them as long as they know that they are being monitored. Okay, all right, so many quiz questions. Okay. Yes, I think I will need to wrap things off and give a summary of what has transpired this afternoon, just so that we won't leave the session thinking too much about our online examinations. So for this afternoon, we did discuss the whats and whys of assessment. So I hope that we were reminded why we are doing assessment in the first place, not just because we are required to give quizzes or exams so that students can have grades, but so that we can measure and improve the learnings of our students. We learn about the types and forms of assessment so that we can also look over the different types that we can choose from. So when we go back to our course objectives, we can see which ones have the best fit for the learning objective. So if we find out that the quiz is not the best fit, but we can actually employ something else, then let's go for it. And so we also discussed how to facilitate it in an online environment and a flexible environment. We saw the importance of selecting what type of assessment and designing it well, organizing it well, and writing the assignment guide, which you will be doing by group. And of course, seeing the importance of how the students will be able to make the assessment and what do you call this? And the importance of us evaluating it as well, evaluating the assessment that we were able to give. And so, of course, I believe that a lot of the things that were brought up here were the issues and concerns with online assessment. I believe that we can take this discussion even further in the discussion forums so that the people who can share will not just be me, because let's say there are other people who have experienced more forms of cheating and they can give more insights on how they were able to handle it. So yes, let's create a discussion forum for our thoughts and recommendations on maintaining academic integrity. So yes, thank you so much for this time and for allowing me to share these things about assessment to you. Thank you for your kind words, and yes, I will see you in our course site. I have some tutors who will be answering some of your questions there. So if you don't see my name popping out, there are those who have also been assigned to mark your assignments and reply to your questions in the discussion forum. So I will be there as much as I can, but the presence of my tutors will also be there. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.